A client of mine, she's a divorce lawyer, and she said she's never been busier in her 25 years of practice. And I noticed in your book, you cite some research from John Gottman talking about how the first 3 minutes of a marital argument, he could predict over 90% accuracy, I think it is, what the outcome was. Can you share some insights there?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the biggest insights, I found that people can put to use immediately, which is that John Gottman, who's like a legend, in terms of social science and marriage and relationship. I'm going to get a full back tattoo of John Gottman's face. Like this guy really, he really knows his stuff. And like what he found was that the first 3 minutes of an argument could predict with 96% accuracy how the rest of the argument would go and how it would end. And not only did it predict the argument, it also was predictive of divorce. And so just the issue being, if you're going to raise a problem with your spouse, your partner, if it's going to potentially be something could get difficult, it's like just calming down, not firing with both barrels immediately, not pointing fingers and saying you, and just raising the issue, calm, politely, even in a friendly way. It's not a personal attack. It's a problem to be solved. That can make such a huge difference. And, it's like very often we're impulsive. We want to get out there, but it's like by just being calm, nice about raising issues, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that we're that pattern oriented, that just seeing 3 minutes of this back and forth exchange can yield such accuracy in terms of the outcomes. Is there, again, some insights there, and just in terms of, you kind of touched on a little bit. I mean, we tend to sort of point fingers. We talk about you versus me. Like, what are some of those issues that tend to just light us up into that real defensive mode or attack mode?
Gottman has what he calls his four horsemen, which in terms of romantic relationships, the things that are most predictive of divorce, like over 80%. And those are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And basically, we're all unfortunately familiar with them. Criticism is like complaining actually in a marriage or a relationship isn't actually a problem. It doesn't actually. Complaining is like, it's actually necessary because shouting matches only predict divorce 40% of the time. Usually what happens is people stop talking and start leading separate lives, and that's what usually precedes divorce. So complaining is not a problem. Criticism is when you make the complaint personal. Criticism is when it's one thing to say you didn't take out the trash. It's another thing to say you didn't take out the trash because you're an idiot, or you didn't take out the trash and you always do this and I can't rely on you. Once the complaint becomes personal, it's criticism. Criticism's bad. Stonewalling is just when you shut down. When the other person raises an issue and you just shut down, tune out, that does not allow for good back and forth. Defensiveness is whenever your partner raises an issue and you're, well, you, oh yeah, but you, and it's as opposed to listening, taking it in. And then contempt is the worst of all. Contempt is the most predictive thing of divorce. And that is anything that demonstrates you think you're on a higher plane than your partner, that you're dismissive of them, that you think you're better than them. John Gottman describes that as sulfuric acid for love. Just don't do it.
Wow. Well, I mean, again, in high performance, coaches have a divorce rate that's, I don't know the statistics, but seemingly higher than the average in terms of when we look at pro sport, college sport. It's a challenging profession. There's a lot of moving around. It's challenging on the family, performance staff as well, not just the coaches. Before I dive in a little bit more there, if we think of pandemic, we think of sort of, Netflix and red wine at night. And the book, and this of course applies to performance staff and coaches and the rest of us and our loved ones, but Netflix and red wine at night, is this the kind of date that's going to reignite one's, connection with their partner, or are there better strategies when you're looking at the
this is one of the other really big insights in terms of romantic relationships, is that they did a really big study a while back that had people go on dates. And the dates could be exciting, like something that was fun, like going to a concert, roller coasters, horseback riding, or a date that was pleasant. Go to a movie, go to dinner, hang out, get a pizza. And man, did pleasant lose. Excitement is really key, because the thing is that we always think it's like we're in love with the other person is in love with us, and that's absolutely true, and that's great. But we don't exist in a vacuum. It's like one of the things is when you first started dating somebody, you know, you did all this exciting stuff. You went out, you went to places, you tried to find cool things to do. And we usually think like, oh, that's something you do in the beginning. It's like, no, that was part of the reason you fell in love. There's a concept in psychology called emotional contagion. And basically it's that emotionally you're affected by what's around you. If you're at a party, you feel upbeat. If you're around the house and it's quiet, you kind of get sleepy. And we can leverage that in relationships if you make sure that, your date night or your whatever is something fun, is something exciting where the environment is going to cause an emotional rise in you. Like I said, whether it's, you go out horseback riding, roller coasters, whatever, if it's doing something that is emotionally getting a rise, you are going to associate that, like Pavlov, you're going to associate that with your partner. And that can keep relationships alive. When it's night after night of Netflix and wine, well, I hope those Netflix movies are really exciting, because if they're not, you can do this thing many people are familiar in relationships called getting bored. And that's not a prescription for success.
I was going to say, with sort of the remote working transition that we're going through out of this pandemic, we're now, I forget what the statistics were, but I think businesses predicted only 20% of people would want to work from home post-pandemic, and it's something like over 50% or 60%. And so remote working is obviously here to stay. And with that is, more time spent in the home, and it's harder to kind of potentially, if you're not being more proactive, do some of these things. And, you talk about in the book how close to 70% of marital issues actually never get resolved. And, is it really that idea of, it's not what you talk about, it's how you talk about it? I mean, you touched on that before, but could you shed some light?
Yeah, the issue is that, like, basically it sounds depressing to a lot of people up front that literally 69% of serious marital issues never get resolved. And that's often because there's differences in, fundamental values about things. But that actually doesn't have to be a problem. That 69% stat is true for happy relationships and unhappy relationships. Because what's critical isn't necessarily solving those problems. It's not resolution of conflict, it's regulation of conflict. They may differ from you on this. It's like, how do you handle it? Do you treat them as the enemy, as the opposition, as somebody who has stupid ideas? Or do you find a way where you can both kind of honor both of your values? And that's what's really critical, is people get too focused on, we need to solve this, we need to fix this. And certainly with some issues you do, but with a lot of the stuff you don't. And it's that tone, that attitude that you come to unsolvable problems with that can really make the difference. Where getting to know your partner, one of the other things that Gottman talks about is love maps, which is basically just understanding where your partner is coming from, understanding that to them, taking out the trash is symbolic of love. To you, it's just an errand. Once you understand, oh, to them, this is really important, then you can start to say, oh, like, they don't see this the same way I do. I don't have to agree with them, but if I can respect that, then we can get along better. So it's that issue of tone. It's that issue of just kind of respecting the perspective as opposed to always trying to solve things. It just makes a tremendous difference, because there's always going to be stuff you disagree about. And if you turn everything into the end of the world, then there's not hope, versus, just trying to regulate the conflict, understand where they're coming from, find a way to honor both your values.
All that sounds tremendous. The question again comes back to those competitive individuals. When we see the athletes and the coaches, what are some of those strategies that help us to gain a little bit more of that perspective, to your point, to not think like everything's a competition then between partner, spouse and whatnot.
Yeah. It's like, if you're somebody, I can imagine for coaches, it's like you're always focused on improvement, on getting better. And that often means you're hyper-focused on the negative, because how do you get better? You bring the negative up. And it's like, that can mean you're kind of training yourself for that. And again, in terms of things where there's clean, measurable improvement in performance in sports and other arenas, it's a great perspective to have. In relationships, again, you've got some idiosyncratic stuff where people just see things, their definition of love, their definition of marriage. Why do couples have so many arguments about money? And it's because, again, values. Money is a metric of what you value.
Mm-hmm.
And you value different things, you're going to spend money on different things. So it's really critical to just first and foremost understand your partner's perspective, where it's like they don't see this like I do. Their attitude isn't, we need to get better by 10% in our relationship. Their attitude is, I want to chill. And if you realize where that comes from, oh, my partner's a little more neurotic than I am. They get stressed out quicker than I do. If I'm push, all that's going to do is increase the stress. I don't act like that. They do. So I need to think about that in terms of how to regulate the conflict, to understand that they don't see this like I do. They're not pushing for constant improvement. It's like to just kind of take a step back and say, how are we going to do this? It's more of a negotiation. You don't want to be pounding the table. You want to understand what they value, what you value, and see where you can meet in the middle.